I'm close to finishing Dave the Diver, and to be frank, I'm glad. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of cool stuff I liked, but I think Dave the Diver has a content bloat problem. I'm going to use Dave the Diver to explain future creep and what I think makes good and bad new content. I started playing Dave the Diver for the core gameplay loop of diving, bringing up the fish, and using the fish you caught to maintain your restaurant. Adding complexity and novelty through new mechanics is normal in most games, but the more you play, the more mechanics that detract from this core gameplay loop are added to Dave the Diver. The first example of this is the farms. You unlock the first farm pretty early on. To actually use the farm though, you need to travel to a separate area of the game, buy the seeds, plant water, and then harvest the crops. Taking the player away from the main gameplay loop might be forgivable if the farm was important, but it's not really necessary for your restaurant. The 10 most expensive recipes currently in the game don't even use any farm vegetables, for example. The only times it is necessary to use the farm is when special VIP customers request a certain meal, which you're required to grow specific crops if you want to prepare it for them. After growing them once, you can buy them from the farmer though. You're not required to make the dishes for these VIP customers, but giving them the dish they want unlocks more mechanics and content. I also think they take up a seat in the restaurant. But the Overworld isn't the only farm. In Chapter 3 of the game, you discover the Sea People village, who tasks Dave with helping them repair the village. As a part of that, you unlock a second farm. To use the seaweed farm, Dave must also travel to that farm. Then there's the fish farm, which grows fish for you. Dave must also travel to that farm to interact with it. I don't understand why there's 3 separate rooms in the world that you have to travel to if you want to interact with them, when Dave the Diver already features phone apps, which are submenus that let you track different things in the game. Speaking of the phone, it's a Tomodachi minigame added at some point, which you don't have to interact with, and it doesn't impact the main game at all unless you want to complete all the achievements. As your restaurant grows, you start to hire more people to keep up with the customers. That'd be fine, but most of the employees you hire can only handle certain tasks, and I found I was left mostly cleaning up dishes since customers will leave if there are dirty dishes in their spot by the time they order. If you really want to automate the tasks you dislike, you can look up which staff can do what when upgraded, but if you don't, it's a money and time waster. Before the restaurant opens, you need to choose which dishes are on the menu and how many portions you want to serve. I thought this was cool. You'd have to guesstimate how many people would want whatever dish based on the previous night's performance. But that's not how it works, since you can just press the auto supply on any dish, and the chef Bansho will make as many as you need, given you have enough ingredients. Not only that, but if you swap the menu after you've made it, you will lose all the ingredients that you would have needed to make those dishes. It's just more unnecessary complexity and resource wasting. During the main story, you also have several mini-games and submissions. On one hand, I get it. The devs wanted to experiment a bit and add some novelty to break up the main gameplay loop. The issue that lots of people have is that they're mandatory once you've started it, and they're mandatory to at least progress the story. I'm talking about things like hand-holdy puzzles, stealth sections, and even a rhythm game. Different sections will work super well for some people, especially anyone bored of the main gameplay loop, but it's also going to be really irritating to people who would rather be playing the main gameplay loop, especially when each of those new mechanics have a forced tutorial you have to follow. I think there are some mechanics that are introduced that do complement the main gameplay loop, like the Eco-Watcher quests, which you're required to do things like catch certain fish or pick up certain items while you dive. But the rewards are minimal, things like minor cosmetics, and it's not an impactful decision whether you choose to finish those side quests or catch more fish for your restaurant. I think that's where my issue lies. There's a bunch of additional mechanics, but none of them really impact your decision making. Like sure, there's 3 different drinks added to the menu and each of them have their own unique minigame, but they take a lot of time and don't bring much money. You can level up and look for certain traits in your staff to do the tasks you don't want to do, or automate the entire restaurant aside from like 1 or 2 things, but there's no real downsides to not serving drinks. It's just another thing you're suggested to do. Some people will like all these mechanics individually. Some people like most of them in tandem too. But I think Dave the Diver suffers a little bit from feature creep. In the software and development world, we have a term called scope creep. Scope creep is when you keep expanding the scope of the project to include new features far beyond its initial vision. This usually makes a project take way longer and way more money to create. When you keep adding new features to an existing project, I'd call that feature creep, which can be overwhelming. Look at how people react to trying to learn Blender or other 3D modeling programs. But what happens when you have several ideas for a game and the budget to implement them all? I don't know if this is common knowledge, but Dave the Diver isn't really an indie game. The studio behind Dave the Diver, Mint Rocket, is a subsidiary of Nexon. You might remember Nexon in the news a bit ago. It was the company who tried to sue the Dark and Darker developers. From what I read online, they treat some games well, but turn others into gotcha cash grabs or cancel them. But point being, Mint Rocket is one of Nexon's smaller pet divisions, where they're allowed to work on what they want, as long as it's fun, and will get Nexon their return on investment, obviously. And the scope of Dave the Diver really reflects that. I've seen Dave the Diver also described as a puddle, wide in breadth and variety of content, but shallow in the depth and complexity of the mechanics. I think Dave the Diver appeals to people who get bored easily or find the main gameplay loop too stressful. Note that you can run out of oxygen on a run and lose almost all of the fish you caught that dive. But there's not really a fail state in Dave the Diver, since you can always get more fish. So, what makes bad or bloat content? I'd say it's mechanics that take players away from the main gameplay loop. It sacrifices pacing and flow for novelty. They can be fun, but if it's not as fun to the player, then the main gameplay loop then will get irritating, especially when there are forced tutorials and sections you have to follow. Adding complexity isn't the issue either. Stardew Valley adds complexity and new mechanics all the time. Dave the Diver also adds complexity through things like aggressive fish that will attack you, but you deal with all of them the same way. Dodge and harpoon, or use the arsenal in the game to blast them. I was able to suggest something. I'd say expand on the ways you can catch fish, since for most of the game you're using a harpoon gun or the net gun. Obviously, like I said, all the mechanics I mentioned are in relation to and in context of each other. In other games, they might work just fine, and everyone will enjoy individual parts, like farming. Some people will like that it's just a chill farming minigame. I just don't think all of the mechanics complement each other in Dave the Diver, and they could work if there was more consideration about how they impacted each other and could create meaningful decisions for the player. So, what makes good new content? What makes an efficient game? I'd say that good content expands on the core gameplay loop and acts synergistically, enhancing its complexity. They work especially well when the mechanics present the player with an interesting choice, be it strategic, a new challenge, or angle for the main gameplay loop, or in the narrative. I have an example of a game that also has a hunting then cooking food gameplay loop that I think does this well, Battle Chef Brigade. It's a short game, especially when compared to Dave the Diver, but I think it expands on its core premise and gameplay loop at a much more reasonable pace. If you want to hear more about it and why I think it's an efficient game, you can click the link on the screen. Thanks, and I'll see you there.